But that's in the news. A lot of people are talking. Has anybody talked about the Ray Rice thing yet? I mean, all right. Well, I'll go into a really taboo subject to start off. It's a way to start off is domestic violence. Yeah, that video. Me and my wife watched that together. That's a great thing to watch and go. Oh man, that looks up. That's I don't look that bad now, do I? Oh, that's a tough shot. That's way worse than that pizza box I left open last week, wasn't it? Oh, that's way worse than me picking my toenails in bed now, huh? I don't look so... Oh, he's dragging her out of the elevator. That's far worse than farting during sex, I think. That's awful. I would never. I mean, I've been married 2 years. I'd never hit my wife. But I mean, I never really hit anybody. I'm just not I don't hit people.
Hey, welcome to Behind the Comedy. It's our first episode, and our first comedian is John Caparulo. But before we get to the interview, I'd like to tell you a few things about the young man, if I could. First of all, his resume is wildly impressive. He was on the Blue Collar Comedy Tour, The Next Generation. He did Vince Vaughn's Wild West Comedy Tour. He did Ron White's Salute to the Troops. And he was on the Showtime special, Unsportsmanlike Comedy, with Rob Gronkowski. He's been a panelist on Chelsea Lately over 150 times. He's done The Tonight Show, The Late Late Show, Jimmy Kimmel Live. He did a 2-year residency in Vegas. And he has a comedy special on Netflix called Come Inside Me. You should watch it. It's hilarious. And listen, I don't want to spoil anything about the interview, but one of my favorite parts is I asked him if his father was funny growing up. And he said no, but that his father enjoyed fart jokes, which I think is notable because his father's an engineer. And you wouldn't think that engineers would revel in fart humor. But this got me thinking. I've been thinking about this a lot, actually. It's juvenile, but I think it's kind of profound. I think laughing at fart jokes might be the single thing that brings humanity together. May I present my case? Some people say that it's art, but this thing behind me, this is a Basquiat called Dust Heads. It was sold at auction in 2013 for $48 million. I bought that from allposters.com for $34, which I think is a much more reasonable price point. My point is, there's no way that has universal appeal. No piece of art has universal appeal. So it can't be art that brings us all together. Some people will say that it's music, but this is singer-songwriter Taylor Swift. According to the internet, she made $1.82 billion last year. But none of those dollars were mine. It's not that I hate her. I just have no opinion about her. She's not writing music for 42-year-old heterosexual white males with a drinking problem and an Aerosmith tramp stamp. We all don't like the same music. So it can't be music that brings us together. Food has been presented as maybe the thing. We all eat, don't we? But I looked this up. Did you know that Americans spent $1 billion on Dido nuggets last year? Upon further research, it turns out that the rest of the world combined did not spend $1 billion on Stegosaurus-shaped poultry. So it can't be food. We don't all like the same thing. I think it's farts. I think it's laughing at farts. I think laughing at a well-timed fart transcends politics, race, religion, culture, language. It is the universal thing that bonds us. And I would suggest that when an engineer farts and laughs, it humanizes him. When your parents hear a fart and laugh, it humanizes them. And is there anything that we're trying to do more here at Behind the Comedy than humanize these amazing performers? I don't think that there is. So I just wanted to thank John Caparulo's father. For one, inspiring your son with the power of flatulence. For two, inspiring this new worldview of mine, this new concept as farts is the great connector. And three, for in many ways inspiring the very first episode of Behind the Comedy. Now please enjoy my conversation with the hilarious John Caparulo. It's only mostly about farts. John, welcome to Behind the Comedy. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, listen, anytime. I figured we should start this at the beginning. So, where are you from?
I am originally from East Liverpool, Ohio. Uh, just Ohio, basically. It's the easy way to put it. But yeah,
Yeah, this is the
from
only answer that I sort of looked up before, but Ohio is sort of a hotbed for birthing comedic talent. You know, Jonathan Winters, Gallagher.
yeah, a lot of any from Cincinnati, I think is where he's from.
I don't know. I
But
didn't get
yeah,
that
there's like
granular.
I went to Kent State. I graduated from Kent State. And I know Drew Carey
Mhm.
and Arsenio Hall both went there. Both graduated from there, I think. But there might be other. Well, Steve Byrne, actually, we were there at the same time.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we never knew each other till we ran each other at the Comedy Store. But yep. A lot of comedians come out of Ohio. It's really I don't know what it is about Ohio and just being kind of like right on the edge or in the middle, like right. I guess as the Midwest begins, you
Yeah.
have a lot of people with sort of like I guess maybe still of an East Coast attitude or something like that, and but we're we still feel kind of left out and um pissed off because we're in Ohio. I don't know, but
Well, it's a
yeah.
little bit of a flyover state, right? Like, I don't know. Does Ohio have a feeling? Does it feel like, I think Boston, Miami, New York, LA, those places have feelings, right? Something there.
Yeah.
Does Cincinnati or Cleveland, do they feel like something?
Um, Depression. They definitely have their own. It definitely has its own vibe and its own feel. I don't know. Being from there, I don't know if I can really put my finger on exactly what it is, but it's it's definitely there's a there's a Ohio. I've always said that I like that Ohio is we're proud of where we're from, but we're not all that proud. Where it's like we can make fun of ourselves, and we don't have to, we're not like Texas where it's just
Right.
intimidating, like we're like, okay, I get it, you
That's
like
too
your
much.
state, but yeah. So it's we're just we're just in the middle there, I guess, of all that stuff,
Gotcha.
everything geographically and emotionally.
All right. So you're from Ohio. Tell me about your father. Was he a funny guy? Is he a
No,
funny guy?
no, he's well, okay. I should say, a lot. My friends always, think he's funny, and they always, are amused by my dad. I mean, my dad is the dad who, like when my friends would come over, my dad is the dad who, was like, "Oh man, it was hilarious. Your dad farted," or whatever. Like my dad's like just really uninhibited and not like most dads, I guess. So it's just, most dads seem like an adult,
Yeah.
and mine seems more like a, a an older brother.
Gotcha.
It's just like he's he's my dad's he's goofy. He's definitely different. I wouldn't say he's necessarily funny on purpose, but yeah, he's a character.
Do you think you
He's
got any of your comedic sensibilities from him?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I got a lot of I guess, the way, I guess the idea of simplifying things and making things, like, because I think we as human beings make a lot of things and we complicate things. And my dad is a real like, when it comes down to it, it's just this like most dads hold in their farts when your friends come over. My dad is like, what? What everybody farts, so what? Just because mine was ridiculously loud around your friends or or your date. Yeah, it's he's that
Plus,
guy.
farts are objectively funny, right? Like, there's no
I
farts will always be funny.
If you can't laugh at farts, then it really I think you're missing out on life, man.
I think so
It's
too.
you're not really I mean, when that becomes not funny, I don't know if I want to live in that world,
We'll be right back with more Behind the Comedy with John Caparulo.
Guess like it's really one of those things. I've had to learn how to argue with a woman, which means I mean the best way to win is to fucking lose. Really, because winning the argument doesn't get me anything except more fucking arguing. So I mean, Yeah, I've had to learn. Yeah, I've had to learn that pointing out that she's on her period doesn't help my argument at all. It, because I'm like, why am I such an asshole this week? Man, she hates me all week. This fucking sucks. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute, what day is it? Oh yeah, and then I tell her like, you're like, she's gonna react to it like, you got me. Yeah, I'm fucking bleeding. Yeah, you're a sharp one there, Cap.
So crafting a story and things like that, I think, came from my mom. My mom's comes from more of a, I guess, a family of intellectuals versus my dad's from more of a blue collar family. Yet my dad, is very book smart. He's an engineer. So
Wow.
he's so I don't want to talk like my dad's adult. He's not, but he's
He just loves he loves farts.
he comes from that sort of he comes from a background of a lot more blue collar-ish background than what my mom came from. Whereas I mean they weren't exactly my grandparents on that side weren't exactly rich or anything like that, but they blended in with high society better than than would my dad's family.
A
So
blue collar engineer that loves farts. Did he ever take it to the next level? Did he light them on fire? Anything like that?
no, we used to record them. We always like back in the we used to have a tape recorder like set up in the corner of the living room. Whenever you had one. So I mean, it kind of had a brown tint to it after a while, but it was it was the fart tape recorder. I mean, it was funny while you did it. I mean, it was like get that one on. Let's put that one on tape, but then
Typical
listening to it back
engineers.
isn't exactly that
Boy.
funny. It's just like it's a whole bunch of farts. So yeah,
All right.
I've gotten better in my older age now. With better technology, I think I've gotten better at recording
Right.
farts because I can do some post production and stuff like that on them. So
It's important. What about siblings? Do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have an older sister. She lives in Ohio. She and I we haven't we were always really close.
Mhm.
Growing up. She's 3 years older than I am, and we were always cool. But yeah, we fell out about 6-7 years ago, and we haven't talked since. So it's just
Family, man. Well, I only ask because it appears that the youngest child is usually the funny one, like the tension breaker. Did you find that to
right.
be?
That seemed to shake out that way. I mean, yeah, I definitely was the I was always the one who was just more I guess I had my head in the clouds more than anybody else did. And I mean, plus, my sister, like, she was able to sort of, she was able to join society a lot better than I was. Like, my sister always had boyfriends, and, she was just like, she just was able to sort of be a functional member of society a lot better than I was going to. Like, she was and it's still more normal than I am. Like I'm the youngest and I'm a fucking jackass. So here we are.
This is a good segue. So in your school, who was the funny kid, and was it you?
It was yeah. I mean, I would say that I remember I got me and my friend Neil, the two of us, we had like a because when they put those closed circuit TVs in the high schools and stuff like that, like in the 90s, we had our own like morning show on Fridays, like called Fun with John and Neil, where we did like a skit on the show. And like I was always we were voted class clowns,
Mhm.
when we were seniors. So I guess I was always the guy who was funny, and I was looking for any moment I could get to, pop off a one liner or something like that in class. But, I wasn't the guy. I'm not a lampshade on his head kind of,
Right.
guy. I was just always, I was always looking for that opening to say something funny.
Yeah. Did you experience any stigma as like the funny kid? Because I find that I think in society, we think you can't be smart and be funny. So I think people that are funny get typecast. Did you
Right.
experience anything? like that?
Here's the thing for me, it was kind of like, I guess I was kind of like Bart Simpson, except I got good grades. So it
Oh,
was like I was able to sort of like push the envelope a little bit to a certain degree because it wasn't like, I was a total, I guess, waste of space or a total loss. Where it was like, I think teachers let me kind of push it and be kind of, silly or funny or whatever because, well, he did his homework too,
yeah.
or he actually does, pay attention to when he has to.
Mhm.
I mean, well, I always talk about like my parents, well, because I've implemented this with my own child. My daughter's 8, and from the time I was about 4, my parents would just let me cuss around the house. Like it was just,
4.
at
That's
first because they thought
impressive.
it was cute. Because I remember, I think it all started from them, from what they said, and from what it all started. It was like they, my dad was trying to fix a sliding glass door,
Mhm.
and he was cussing at it because he was mad as usual. Because my dad was one of those guys, he fixed everything around the house, fixed the car, all that stuff. And he was always, pissed off and cussing at it. I did a bit years ago about me having to hold the light and get yelled at and shit like that. But
Yeah.
anyway, I was probably about 4 and I was mimicking what he was doing, fixing the door with a like a popsicle stick. And I'm like, my parents said I was like, oh shit, I'm fixing the door. Shit, I'm fixing the door. So they thought it was funny because their little kid said shit.
Yeah.
And they kind of just let me go from there. Where it was like, and the thing is I kind of, I have this same sort of lenience with my own daughter where it's like, they let me cuss around the house and stuff. And they knew it was fine because I knew that there were borders. There were like there I didn't cross the line when I went to school. I knew
Yeah.
like I couldn't go to school and cuss out my teacher. I knew I couldn't, go cuss out, my grandparents or something like that because they, you have to know your audience basically. And that's what like I think I was they trusted me to know where the line was. And that's the same thing with my daughter. It's like, yeah, she will she can string them together at home, but she knows like, yeah, she's not going to go out in public and do the same thing. She knows where the limits are. And
Yeah,
yeah,
you got to give them enough rope to hang themselves, I think.
right. Yeah. And it's like I just usually just didn't get myself in trouble. It was funny because like my friends would come to my house and it was like my house was the house that they knew that they were allowed to cuss at. And they
Yeah.
would just like let it all go when they got to my house. And they didn't, but they didn't know how to cuss. So they would just just let loose this diatribe of just terrible cuss words on my mom, like, like how you doing, PJ? Oh, I'm bitch fuck fine, Mrs. Caparulo. Like, what? Why would you say that? And it's like, it just my house was the house where you could you could let your hair down, so to speak. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I cuss a lot. My 3-year-old daughter has said "what the fuck" twice lately within context, which I don't think is good. But I did watch a bunch of stuff today, and you have a great line in pertinence to helping your father. You say something like, "I'd rather try on dresses." Do you remember
Then help my dad fix anything.
it?
Yep, yep.
We'll be right back with more Behind the Comedy with John Caparulo.
Right, I don't know if you remember, there's a recall on Jif. I don't know if anybody else remembers or if you're all adults. But I couldn't get my fucking Jif, man. Like before that happened, like I had no idea that the Jif jar was clear. I always thought it was brown. I never had to fucking chisel peanut butter off the sides, but because there was like a salmonella outbreak at the Jif plant, and it just kept going and going. Like you couldn't get any fucking Jif forever. And my wife even tried to talk me into like she's like, why don't you just get another brand? I'm like, why don't you just fuck off? All right, I mean, don't try. I hate when people try to minimize my problems. Like. It's like, why don't you try Trader Joe's Old Fashioned? I'm like, do you work for fucking Trader Joe's? Jesus Christ. Like, I'm like, because I know what Old Fashioned is code for. It's code for fucking gross, is what it is. I mean, like, I'm just going to forget the puddle of fucking oil on top of my peanut butter when I open it. Oh, I'll just stir that in and I won't remember that. No, I will fucking remember that. It's fucking gross. Shouldn't be there. But it's, yeah, it went forever though. Like it went for months. Like you couldn't get a fucking Jif. Like I remember, like I was on my way home from here one night when that was happening. Like I stopped. There was a Vons around the corner from my house. I never go there. I stopped there that night on my way home. I go in the peanut butter aisle. There's one jar of Jif, and and they weren't fucking around either. It was like the Donkey Kong barrel of fucking Jif, you know, like and it handles on the side and shit. Like, I'm like, oh fuck yeah! I put it in my car. And I'm like, all right. I felt like I was shoplifting. I go up to the front. Yeah, I put it on the belt. Lady rings it up. She's like, boop. Oh, sorry. It's like this has been recalled. I can't sell it to you. I'm like, oh well. Well then, can I just have it? Yeah, I mean, it made me realize at that point. I'm like, I would rather risk salmonella poisoning than eat fucking Skippy. Yeah.
So, outside of the farts, who were your early comedic influences?
My early comedic influence, Eddie Murphy was huge for me. Like I remember when he was on Saturday Night Live, my parents would, if we didn't stay up on Saturday to watch it, they like videotape it or whatever. And I loved watching, like, it was back when him and Joe Piscopo were like the stars of the show. And he was probably one of my, he was my first like comedic, like the one that made me want to do stand up. Cause I loved his, what he did on SNL and his movies. I remember my dad taking me to see Beverly Hills Cop, when I was like 9. And I always loved that stuff. But then I think I was 12 when I rented Eddie Murphy Delirious, and it just was the first time I ever watched somebody do stand up like that, where he was just talking about his childhood and just all of his his opinions and his feelings, but his whole background and his dad and the ice cream man and all that stuff, and it just looked so fun, besides being hilarious. And I just it was the moment for me where I was like, wow, that is pretty cool. And I sort of identified with it because I felt like, well, that's kind of like what I do with my friends and stuff like that. And so he was the big comedy influence for me. And then later, like guys like Sam Kinison and Dice, and those guys were huge when I was like in 9th grade. Those guys were rock stars. And
those are the years, I think, sort of 7th through 10th grade is where I think are, if you're into funny stuff, the people that are around then influence your comedic sensibilities.
And really, like, I don't know if people really take me seriously when I say, like, when I have like whether it's maybe a guy who comes up to me who's maybe in his 20s, or I have like sometimes I'll have like parents who bring their kid to my show because the club will allow them to chaperone them or whatever. And when they tell me that, like, yeah, I used to listen to your stuff at that age, 13, 14, whatever, and I'm like, that is so cool to me, because I'm like, that's when I was listening to the guys who made me really, really want to do that, and
it's a magical time for comedy, I think, especially
it really is.
I don't want to get but I think with boys particularly, like, that really speaks.
It is. I think so. And I don't know, as far as the female experience with it, I don't know that one. I don't know when that happens, but I do know that for me, and for, it seems like a lot of other boys, men, whoever who get into comedy, it does seem like that's about the time, like you said, like between 7th grade and 10th grade.
Yeah, I think
the
those are the
prime time where, because it's the time where you start really realizing who and what you are and what's in your future. Because that was about the time I had to accept that athletics weren't going to happen. So it was like, what do I do here? And that's when I started to sort of figure out who I was, and yeah.
So that's perfect. So when did you decide to try stand up as a thing? When was your first open mic?
First time. See, I always say tell people I started at June 2nd of 97, which officially I did. But I the first time I tried it, I was 19, and so this would have been 1994, and it was in I want to say it was late September, early October, because I remember my sister, and she got married in September, and I remember I was best man at their wedding, and I remember I did a whole best man speech and everything, and it was mildly amusing, but nothing. It wasn't too hacky. Let's just say that. So, anyway, I just remember being at the wedding reception, and my mom going around, telling basically everybody at the wedding reception, like, Johnny's going to be a comedian. Yeah, he's going to go do stand up, because I remember the place where I had to do open mic was there was a place in Cuyahoga Falls. It's still there, but they have a different location because the first one burned down. But it's called the Comedy Stop now. But it was called Hilarities at the time, and I had to book my first open mic like 3 months ahead of time. Like it was like a 3-minute spot. I had to book that far out in advance, and so in that time, like, it got around to everybody that, I'm going to go do stand up, and, this thing that all my friends and everybody said that, I should do. And they think that's what I'm going to be. And so I remember my sister drove me there because my mom was more comfortable with me not driving for some reason. And I guess because maybe I was nervous or whatever. I don't know. But so my sister drove me there. She was the only one who actually saw it. But I just, the only thing I remember from that set is some guy in the back in the middle of my set yelling, "Who cares?"
Oh God.
And that guy still lives in my head. Like he's still there when I'm on stage now. Like if I'm going too long without a laugh, the "Who cares" guy's back there going, you better say
That's
something
so
funny.
mean to do to him. First of all, a young kid. Second of all, a young kid doing open mic. What a
I did that night obviously was a disaster. And I think I did it. I did that place again, like maybe a couple months after that. But I did another place in the middle of there, and it sucked. And I was, and then the third time I did it was awful. It was the same place. I remember when I went back to that place in Cuyahoga Falls. I remember they would tell open micers, you have to be TV clean. You can't do anything.
Oh.
And I just thought when they told me that, I'm like, that doesn't apply to me. Because I had seen their shows there before. It's like I saw other comics, cussing and doing dirty material and stuff. So anyway, I did my set, and it was better than the first time. The "Who cares" guy wasn't there, but it was about, but I just remember getting reprimanded. Like the manager was like, "Hey, you're not allowed to do dirty stuff here," and blah. Like he just like yelled at me for like a few minutes and told me like, we'll have you back and stuff like that. But I got scared off by that. I was just like, man, this seems like I just was, I guess, discouraged by the idea that I wasn't as good at this as everybody told me I'd be, or I thought I would be.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize at the time that it takes time. You can't just walk out there your first time and, be good at this. It takes a while to, get your legs under you. And so I was like, but I was discouraged. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna focus on college. And so when I went again in '97, and I told one person, I told my best friend who was in Pittsburgh at the time, told him I was going just so somebody knew where I was going, but that was it. Nobody else knew I was doing it. Nobody else knew anything about it. And I crushed it. And
really, so you had a 3-year, so you did it about 3 times in '94, and then you focused on college and went back in '97 and had a great return.
Yeah. And it lifted all the pressure for me to not have everybody go, "Oh, this is, you're gonna go do, you're gonna be great at it." It's like, no, just nobody knew about it.
Yeah, just let me go suck for a little while and figure it out. It's funny because I wanted to ask this. So I just watched the first half of the Judd Apatow, Gary Shandling documentary that's on, I think it's on HBO. And Shandling said this thing that I think a lot of comics say, which is that they're really only comfortable on stage. That once they get off, I don't know, they can't deal with people or have conversations. So I wonder that sometimes, but for you, it was uncomfortable, but you just knew that you had to fight through that to get good, and then it would get progressively easier. Is that what that was the idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, it was like, I wouldn't call myself like really gregarious or outgoing, like somebody who would, I was always, relatively quiet until I got comfortable, with people or, with where I was or whatever. I was around friends. But so, going on stage in front of a bunch of strangers, and being expected to make them laugh, it's that is a whole different animal than, you just, hanging out with your friends and, like telling them a story with people that, all the characters, they know them, and,
Right.
all the just firing off all these, little one liners or whatever. It's different when you're up in front of a crowd of people who, they don't know you from anybody, and they're expecting you to make them laugh. It's a different thing. So it's, yeah, it was, for me, it was like, I don't want to say that after that first time I did really well. I mean, when I went back in 97, I don't want to say if they were all good. It wasn't like, oh, I got this figured out. No, it just so happened that that time went really well. And so it was encouraging enough to go, oh, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
And I think I can be really good at this. It's going to take me some time to work at it and become what I think I, can become.
What did you go to school for?
Radio TV production.
So I mean, related.
I picked it off a list. It just went, oh, radio TV. Yeah, it's kind of what I wanted to do, but it was all production stuff. It was all stuff like, the nuts and bolts engineering of it. And the thing is when I go do radio interviews now, like I never even owned a computer in college. So like none of this stuff even applied. Any of the stuff that I learned, like I had to put together projects where you use those carts, or I had to bring, like I remember I had to bring in the Rocky III and the Michael Jackson Thriller album on vinyl to put together a radio project where I transitioned from one song to the next.
Very applicable these days.
What's that?
I said it's very applicable these days.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's just like it just doesn't. The stuff that I learned then would have had no bearing on any sort of if I tried to pursue a career in that.
So you go back on stage, you do well, and then how often do you go now? So you have a renewed interest in pursuing stand-up. Are you going all the time after that?
After that, I mean, that was the thing. It was in Ohio in 97, 98, 99, when the time that I it was still like, there weren't a lot of places to go. There weren't a lot of open mics. A lot of, the comedy boom had kind of ended. Yeah. And it was like, there was a lot of clubs like either closing or they stopped having open mics. They stopped, so it was, fewer and farther between. I mean, there were a few places that I found that I could go work on stand-up, but it was tough. And there was still, I still remember there was still a good like 6-month gap in there too, where I did get discouraged again for a while. And I was like, man, I don't know if I want to go back on. I think I had broken up with a girl and, all that stuff where you're just like, I don't want to go bomb after that. And, the thing that really, got me completely in motion was, my best friend, the one that I told that I was going to do stand up that time, the only one who knew, Timmy, he asked me if, he brought it up. He said, what do you think about moving to LA? And, if he had never brought it up, I don't know if I ever would have even, it probably would have taken me a while to think like that. But he was like, he's like, what do you think about moving to LA? And he just wanted to go. He's not a comic or anything. He just wanted to go, because, hey, let's go to LA. And, he was, so I had him, which was really cool to have a friend like that to lean on. And, wow. So and plus it was really, it's made it so much easier. It's like to really start to develop as a stand-up. It really made it easy for me to go far away from home. Cause then you feel like, like almost like Luke Skywalker or something like that, where you go off to join the Alliance, and it's like, I'm going off to, basically become whatever I want to become. And nobody that I know is going to watch me suck at it, so it's like, I could sort of do it under, in private, away from anybody I knew or anything like that. I could go, to LA, nobody knew me there, and I could, become something. And then anytime anybody I knew saw me, they, be after the product was finished.
We'll be right back with more Behind the Comedy with John Caparulo.
Yeah, I found out the hard way. I don't we don't think the same. because I feel like, look, I've got a great wife, I got a great marriage, we're happy, we got some dogs, it's fucking sweet. In her mind, it's like, oh yeah, he's a great husband, he's very loving and loyal, good provider, but can he take a punch when he's behind the wheel? I don't know. I mean, I better find out. Yeah, I found, if they get dressed for a party, we gotta go to that party. Or, I'm gonna get fucking punched in the face. And she still wanted to go to the fucking party. Like, I mean, like I'm gonna mingle. Like, hey, yeah, good to see you. Yeah, we had a whole thing in the car, but we're good now. Oh, smile. I mean, I love my wife's my best friend. I mean, I can honestly say that. I used to hear other dudes say that, and I just like, that's dumb. I can't have a best friend who can't play video games. That's dumb, but I mean... But it's not about, she's, I always feel like I'm boring her. I mean, like, I'm a very unexciting dude. Like, especially once we get married, it's like, why? Do you want to go out? Why? I have everything I need here, so, I mean, there's no real reason to go outside, is there? I mean, I got you, all right? I'm good. I don't know what... Just order fucking pizza or something. I mean, yeah, she likes to do. She was raised differently. Like they like to really say they get real into holidays. Like she's already asking me like, what are you gonna be for Halloween? What are you gonna be for Halloween this year? I'm like, I'm gonna be a fucking adult. All right, it's fucking. I hate that Halloween.
I'd gotten a little bit more consistent, like a Tuesday night. Pittsburgh, there was a club in Pittsburgh. It's not there anymore. There was a Funny Bone in a place called Station Square in Pittsburgh that I would go on Tuesday nights for about the last year or so of, before we moved to LA. And I would go there and do my little 3-5 minute spots. I eventually, they started, I got the hosting spot or something, how they promote, the open micers and stuff like that. And I took a little time I had a little bit of experience under my belt before I moved to LA, but not enough to, I always thought like it was good that I didn't give myself like time to develop any sort of ego, because, I've heard people, they would, well, even back then they would be like, oh, I want to work the road for a while, or I want to, hone my craft before I go to someplace like LA or New York. But the thing is when you start in LA or New York, you're going to start out the same way anyway. You're going to have to be at the Comedy Store drawing numbers to hopefully get a spot the following week for 3 minutes, during potluck. And, that would be hard to do if I was, somebody who had, started featuring or headlining or something like that and doing 45 minutes on the road, have to come back and do 3 minutes. But I didn't have any of that. So it was like, when I was doing 3 minute spots at the Comedy Store and I ended up getting a job as a doorman and everything.
What did your parents think about you going to LA to pursue comedy?
They were completely, they were completely supportive. They loved it. I mean, and that's the thing is like, I was always really lucky as far as that goes. Like I had their unquestionable support as far as that goes, where it was like, yeah, go do what you want to do, pursue your dreams. And we don't have much, but whatever we have, we'll help you out with. And they really supported it the whole way. And
that's amazing, man.
I mean, of course my mom, especially, was like, of course you don't want your kids to leave home and not see them as much, and that was hard. I know for her and for my dad, I think, but he wouldn't tell you. But I mean, but I think that I really did. They supported me the whole way. It was good. People always say like, were your parents proud of you when you got on like the Tonight Show? My parents were proud of me when I got a job working the door at the Comedy Store. It was like, oh wow, you're in it. You're doing it, man. And it was pretty cool.
I'll tell you, between that and the farting, I think you have perfect parents.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's Well, yeah, I'll I'll
Yeah,
let
let
my
him know.
dad know. Yeah.
All right, so you're working the door and you're doing open mics. What's the progression? Because your resume is unbelievable. What like when was your first paying gig? Like what how did you get to where you are now, I guess?
Well, let's see. Well, first paying gig, I there were a couple, $25 gigs and stuff like that,
Yeah.
before I left for LA. I mean, a couple of those. So I don't want to say I was completely a neophyte or whatever when I came to LA, but I got the job working the door. I also was answered phones at the Comedy Store and stuff. I was a, I was one of the last groups of, Mitzi Shore's, sort of homegrown talent, one of her Comedy Store guys that,
Mhm.
and it really is, when you develop at the Comedy Store as, one of her guys, like one of the guys who works the door. Really, I only worked the Comedy Store. I hardly ever went to the Improv or the Factory, any place like that. I just spent 7 days a week at the store because I was either working the door or trying to get on the fallout list or something. But um, I think the big thing for me was, because I was still having to work day jobs. I still was cutting grass at a golf course up until 2003. 2003 is when I showcased for Montreal, the Just for Laughs festival. And the thing is like I remember I had a showcase. It was one of those showcases where it was like, man, I felt sorry for whoever was going after me because it was just one of those
Kills.
ones. That was like,
Yeah.
man, I ripped. I had a really great set on my showcase,
And that's huge,
and
right? You know that if you kill it just for laughs, that something's gonna happen, usually,
it's
right?
yeah, well, but I mean, this is just the showcase for it. This is the audition to get it,
Oh,
and I still, I remember when they, started announcing the new faces, who were coming. I didn't make the list. They had a list of because they only invited 20 a year, and it was the first year I had showcased, and they kind of used that as a reason to tell like my management or whatever. They're like, yeah, it's his first year, so basically it's like we can brush him to the side. But whoever it was, got in their ear and said, "Hey, come on!" He had a really great, showcase, and I think I'd done my first TV spot right before that. I did the Late Late Show with Craig Kilborn, um, and I really have Eddie Griffin to thank for that because he put me. He did this big show when he had he released Dysfunctional Family,
mhm.
um, in movie theaters. He did a big show at the Comedy Store, and he let me be one of the people who featured in front of him at that both nights at that show. It was a huge show, and guys like that it really does help when guys like that are willing to say, "Hey, you got talent, let me help you out," or whatever. It's huge. And anyway, I did anyway. Whoever got in their ear at Montreal, they added me in as a 21st new face,
Oh wow.
and I I went to Montreal that year and yeah, did long story short, I ended up getting a development deal or whatever with Fox, and for 2 years after that, 2 straight years, and then the year after that was we even went to NBC and got it. Never even shot a pilot though, so
God, that must have been so exciting and then very
it
disappointing.
was, it was, it was. What was really cool was, I mean, of course, you get the development deal, and it's like, oh, now I'm basically sponsored to be a comedian, and now I don't have to go to a day job. I don't have to cut grass anymore. I don't have to do any of that stuff. I can just be a comedian, and that's what really it gave me the chance to now just develop night after night after night, and go to the Comedy Store and do the original room, the belly room, the main room, whatever, as much as I could every night, and I feel like that's where I really started to you know take off as far as artistically and developing and writing new material and all that stuff. It was,
What
yeah,
an amazing
huge.
education, though, it must have been to work at the Comedy Store 7 days a week. I mean, you must have heard
Absolutely.
unbelievable stuff constantly.
Yeah. I mean, because I worked, they would always have me work in the back door, which was, like people who go to the belly room would come in there. I'd have to check their IDs, but, all I had to do was keep the hallway clear and all that stuff. But, you're basically forced to watch the show all night. And like, when I became a paid regular too, it was like, I'm on the fallout list, but it was, it's one of those things that, like I would say, like, you never enjoy it while it's happening,
Yeah.
but you really appreciate it for the experience once you're done. Because I mean, there were, it really tests your resolve as far as, do you really want to do this? I mean, because there were a lot of, it was really, there were nights where it was deflating, it was discouraging. And, I was telling the story, like it was a Friday night and I'm working the back door, and whoever's running the belly room upstairs is like, it's like, John, I have a really big crowd because the sketch group had brought, it was an improv group that they brought this big crowd with them. The place was packed upstairs, which is like, they're almost done and I don't have anybody to go up. I'm like, oh, well, cool. Let me do that. And so I remember, like, I always had a shirt to change into because I didn't want to be wearing my doorman shirt. And I don't know why, like I was fooling anybody, but I changed my shirt. Anyway, I go on stage up in the belly room. I did probably a 15-minute set. I just one of the best sets I'd ever had in my life at that point, and crushed it. I'm floating on air. I come back downstairs, and I come back down, and the manager's like, it's like, hey, Cap, are you done upstairs? Because the ladies' room toilet backed up and it's flooding into the hallway again. And he's like, he hands me a mop, and like so the people who just saw me on stage upstairs, they are now leaving and walking out as I'm mopping the hallway. They just saw me on stage, and I mean, like, girls are going by, like you were really funny. I'm like, thanks. That's not my pee that you're walking through right now, but that's it's but
it's gotta be the greatest
like
thing I've ever
moments,
heard.
like, you'd have to be crazy to enjoy that in the moment. But
Right.
looking back at it, it's like, oh man, of course I'm glad I went through that, because it's what helps you grow as an artist, or really anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So when was the Late Late Show your first time on TV? When was the first time you were on TV?
Yeah, Late Late Show with Craig Kilborn was my first time on TV. It was May of 2003. Yeah, it was
That must have been wild.
yeah, it was. And I was, like, it takes you a few times with those things to start to realize, like, I remember when we taped the show in the afternoon, and then it was on, obviously, like, one something in the morning, because I was last on the show too, so that was the show, like, after whatever Leno, or and so it's like it's 1:30 in the morning when I'm on. But I remember being so excited to watch it, and then when I watched it, I was like, wasn't as fun watching it as it was doing it. Like, you don't get that same charge that you got when you perform, because when you perform, you're like, wow, this is a national TV spot. I'm actually doing stand-up comedy on national television. Because it just, I think as comedians, it's like we need those moments to, like, feel legitimate. Because there's really nothing else that'll tell you that, because it's not like you get a degree or a diploma or certification in this. It's like you need those sort of moments to go, wow, I'm actually really doing this thing. And but yeah, I remember watching it the first time, and I'm like, man, I need to not watch my sets, because it's just never as fun watching it back over. It's like, God, I suck. So yeah, it's just, it's better to just do it and just leave it there. Yeah.
But TV's the thing that you want to be on, right? So when was Late Late Show, and then, I mean, like I said, you've done a bunch of tours, you've been on TV a lot. When was the next time?
The next time, well, let's see. I did the I did Late Late Show with Kilborn. I did it the following year, I think around the same time too. I did Kimmel right around that same time, Jimmy Kimmel Show 2004. And then I did like Comedy Central did Premium Blend back then, where they'd have a lineup of comics. And around that time was when, it was 2005 when we did the Wild West with Vince Vaughn, that tour. And
who else was on that tour?
It was me, Brett Ernst, Sebastian Maniscalco, and Ahmed. And it was 30 days on a bus.
Good times.
It was it was something. Again, it's one of those things is like I didn't enjoy it while it was happening. I mean, it's cool. I did it. It's out. It's fine. But it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, 30 days on a bus with a bunch of dudes is not
That's a
fun.
long. That is a long time.
But it is what it is. It's but I think the next really for me, like I never thought, because of the way my stand up is, like obviously I got a foul mouth. I you know I've always been sort of I've never seen myself as squeaky clean or Disney anything like that, like the type of guy who gets it. And I remember when I got on the Tonight Show, which was right before we went on the Wild West tour, with this first time I did, getting on the Tonight Show was a big moment for me. Like, it wasn't like like it was in the 80s where like everybody saw it,
Right.
or even now where you could like at least put it on YouTube. This was back when like you could do your set and then it'd get blocked on YouTube too. So it was like really tough to, but but just getting on that show, was a big deal for me, because I just felt like, I never thought I could get at that level where they're, because I felt like the Tonight Show was very discriminate. And they always were. I don't know how it is now, but I mean, they were just very like, I think they only put 40 comics on a year at the time. And it was like, I think because I ended up doing it 3 times, doing stand up on there. I did once in 2005, another time in 2006, and then again in like 2008. But
that's surreal. Does it feel surreal at all? I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, there's still, it's weird because I mean, you have times where it's just like, yeah, this is this is what I do. But when you always have those moments where you step outside and go, well, I really did this thing,
That's it.
that
I mean, that's the height. That's like
that I
that's
wanted to do
making
since I was a kid.
right.
I did it, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's incredibly cool. I want to ask a few more things, but my producer wants me to ask this question. So I think in the general society, we view comics as having a dark side, and comedy coming from this dark place. Do you find that to be true with yourself? I've noticed you do a lot of self-deprecating humor.
Mhm.
Is there a dark side to your comedy, or is it
Well, I mean, I guess depends on how dark we're talking about. Like
right?
of course, like there's always been, you know, there's a lot of insecurity and, uh, depression and things like that come into it. But I mean, I think insecurity is the big one for me. That's always been the sort of driving factor of, like, why do I feel like I'm so different, from everybody else, or why can't I sort of, like I said, like how my sister or all my friends, they all seem to, have no trouble like dating or just, finding a regular career path or
Mhm.
paying taxes. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
just being a normal member of society. And it's like there's, I always felt like just sort of, you know, yeah, why am I, what's wrong with me? Why am I so different? Why am I so sort of, you know, on the fringe? And that's probably a part of what, it's made its way. It's probably been the driving factor in a lot of my bits and a lot of the comedy that I talk about. It's just it's because there's part of me that's like, yeah, I kind of sort of have an outside perspective on a lot of things, but then I feel bad about having that perspective. But then there's part of me that sort of like I get shaken back into, you know what? I'm allowed to have that perspective. Fuck them. And that's sort of where the comedy comes out, is like, yeah, you know what? Fuck them. This is how I feel. And then when a bunch of people laugh and clap and you're like, oh, okay. So a lot of people feel that way. All right.
We'll be right back with more Behind the Comedy with John Caparulo.
You took some digs at me this one.
I mean, you're kind of my
Punching bag?
Muse is such a better,
Muse is a better
so
word.
much a better word. See,
I'll take punching bag too.
I liked that. That set was literally, I don't know, 90% of that set I've never said on stage before.
True.
And I love when I get to do that. I love when,
because every bit I do is like, at one time or another it was new on stage, and I try to duplicate and polish and all that stuff, but the first time you come off with something and it really does work, like it's just that it's why I do this.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Does the fame, because you would think, I think it's logical to think, so you're insecure, but then you go on stage, you're getting paid to do comedy, you do the Tonight Show 3 times, you're on Chelsea Handler's show more than 150 times. You've made it. But then does that cure the insecurity, or do you still have that sort of, does it ever go away?
No.
I mean, that's weird, right? Because you would think everyone loves me. I'm getting paid to do this thing. I'm not insecure.
No, because the thing is like, yeah, like you'll always get those reminders that, look, you're always going to be who you are. It's like, it's still like, I never have it all figured out. I'm still going to get it. Anytime I'm too happy, I'm going to get a nice swift kick in the balls. Don't worry. So it's never, I've never had a point where I got it all figured out at all. And I don't think that, I think that can happen especially with comedy. That is a sort of thing where I think we all have to fear it a little bit, where it's like, okay, if you do make it, and you do have things really going for you, do you have anything left to complain about?
Yes.
And that's fortunately I haven't run out of those things at this point. I mean, I've never done that well in comedy to get to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm happy. I'm good.
Yeah.
No, I've always been, there's always reason for me to be pissed off. So yeah, it's,
nice. Well, I guess speaking of that, so like I've watched a ton of your stuff. I think you tend to stay with sort of observational humor. I think that's kind of a safe thing. But you had this one incident with the woman, a Trump supporter. You called Trump dumb, and then she threw something at you. Do you remember this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want me to explain the scenario, I
do, but I guess the larger point is like, do you think that there's a place can comedy can be dangerous? Do you think it should be dangerous? In this case, you said something pretty light, but we're so polarized as a nation.
Really,
she threw something at you.
It was really the climate and the way things, were and still are with that. It was her motivation for reacting the way she did. Because the joke that the thing that I said about Trump wasn't that bad. I mean, really,
you said he was dumb. Like that's very light.
I basically just implied that he was a dick. That's all I did. That's all I said. Because I just said that, because I was comparing like the Washington Monument. They said some people think that looks like a dick, but I thought they were reserving that design for Trump's statue. And and this woman was, she was like harassing comics most of the night. I don't know why they didn't get rid of her. Yeah. I don't like Arsenio was on 2 comics before me that night. He was having trouble because he was making jokes about Trump. I don't know why she was still there, but I was recording my Caplet series at the time. Yeah. And that series I was doing new material every 30 days. I was trying to do a new set of stuff. So every time, like, the material that I was using was stuff that basically I wrote in the car on the way. Like, I had never said it before on stage. And it was like, but I remember running that bit past my wife and she laughed. And I was like, oh, she never laughs at anything I say. So good. And so I took that on stage and I mean, the joke, the line, the bit killed. And this woman just wasn't having, just started yelling, F you, F you, F you at me. And so, of course, I eventually reacted. And then one thing leads to another. She throws a glass at me. And
it was a glass. You handled it very well. I just always find it shocking.
I always thought, and people have said to me, like, yeah, you really, and I felt like I did. I felt like, because that really, the way everything went at that point, because I mean, the place was, everybody was really yelling at her, and it became kind of a bedlam situation. And not only did I finish my set, I brought the next comic on. There was 2 more comics after me. The show carried on. I was very proud of that, and that I was able to. Professional.
You did pick up the stool like you were going to throw it at her, but you didn't, which is what a professional does.
Right. And the thing is, that whole thing, because people always say like, oh, I wish you'd have thrown the stool at her or whatever. And the thing is I guess there was part of me, like when I picked up the stool, I think, because when you're on stage, it's like if somebody heckles you or says something to you on stage, if they are shooting you with a gun, you got to come back with a cannon. That's how you maintain your dominance over this room. And so when that woman threw a glass at me, it's like, well, what do I go back at her that's bigger? And I pick up the stool, and it's like, look, I've never been violent a day in my life. I couldn't, and I mean, I thought better of that real quick. I'm like, I could hit somebody else. I most likely would have hit somebody else. It was just like that. I'm not doing that. But I mean, it was just that, yeah, it was a moment where I'm like, man, I am trying to I was recording for my series, just like, I'm trying to just keep my comedy in line. And this woman's got to start barking at me about her freaking political beliefs. And
comedy's dangerous, man. It bothers me that everyone always asks if comedians go too far, but nobody ever asks if like politicians go too far. Like no one's starting the wars. Like, why is she mad at you? Oh boy. All right, just a couple more because I think we're running out of time. But can you give me your Mount Rushmore of comedians? I guess all-time greats. Like who were, I think so. Here's the thing. I'll preface this by saying my 7th through 10th grade guy was Sandler. I don't know that I necessarily put Sandler on the Rushmore. He was
not as far as stand-up goes, but
yeah, like funny dudes who really meant a lot to me.
Well, I mean, he was a comedian to start out. So, I mean, you really do have to go, okay, you went from a stand-up comedian to where he got, like, this. Yeah. There's, that's pretty much as well as you can do. It's, this is as much as any of us could hope for to have the career that he's had. That guy is wow.
I was crushing.
I heard I remember, like, I had a manager, somebody like that tell me, Sandler, just the amount of money he made off of Rob Schneider movies. It's unbelievable. Like, it's just like millions. Right. But, as far as stand-up comedy goes, the Mount Rushmore for me, I think, you can't not have Richard Pryor up there. My dad introduced me to Richard Pryor probably before I even got into Eddie Murphy. I knew of Richard Pryor, but I think you have to put Richard Pryor. I'll just say my personal Mount Rushmore. I would say, so I leave Pryor off just because he's not really, I wasn't that into his stuff, even though I recognize how great he is. So just know if it was the Mount Rushmore, I would put him on. But
yours,
for me personally, Eddie Murphy, Sam Kinison, George Carlin, and I'll go. Dave Chappelle.
I love Dave Chappelle. Yeah,
great. I mean, it's great comic. Man.
Lives in Ohio.
Chris Rock. Now, Chris Rock. I don't know, one of them. We'll just put a bunch of heads there. Chris Rock and Chappelle. I mean, they're great comics, man.
All right, actually, okay, I still have 2 more. One is with comedians in your own class. Is there a rivalry, or are you friendly with other comics? Like, how does that work? Because
well, I mean, it depends on I mean, for the most part, we've always been cool, friendly. I mean, I think there is some sort of, I think there's a natural sort of competitive. It's like a cattiness almost, because we're all in a sort of a pageant. It's not a beauty pageant, it's a funny pageant, and we're all sort of, I thrived off that sort of, like, I love watching somebody else go on stage and seeing if I could, like, sort of top that or whatever. It's part of what drives you artistically, I think, or at least for me. But I think there's a lot of friendliness. I think that the thing is once we all sort of get into our place where, we start to headline and things like that and start to go off into our own, we sort of lose contact, so we don't really, I haven't seen a lot of those guys I came up with in a long time because we've gone our, separate ways into our own careers. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think
the beauty pageant thing is probably pretty apt because everyone wants to be the prettiest, like you're
just trying to get, you're trying to get attention.
Yeah. All right. And the last thing, do you want to talk about Cartoon Comic? You get a comic book. You might have a series coming out. You want to talk about that?
Well, let's see, it's been a while, but about 10 years ago, I started thinking I wanted to develop my own animated series, because I was I my wife sort of um she got me to watch Louie on FX. She because I never watched live action anything, especially comedy. It's too hits too close to home. I don't want to watch it. It's just yeah, I'll watch something else. But she got me to watch that, and I just thought it was brilliant because I really thought, compared to what I went through, like with development and everything like that, like I thought Louis really captured, the life of a stand-up, and sort of taking the stand-up comic, his perspective that you put on stage, and he was able to, make that into an actual show that is, that is as close to what what I think they're always trying to get out of a stand-up act, when they develop a stand-up into a show. So I thought it was brilliant. And I was like, man, I would love to do a show like that. But I love my humor, and the way my head works is like, I'm very cartoony. I'm very exaggerated with shit. And it's just like, I think in terms of stuff like that, because I love like The Simpsons and Family Guy and all that, South Park. Those are big influences on my comedy. They really are. I mean, really, I take that back on the Mount Rushmore. Homer's got to be there just because he has to be out there because it's Homer.
He's
Simpson.
American
But
treasure.
I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that comedy. I love that sort of being able to just go off the rails with everything and just be really crazy. And so I thought, okay, so if I could sort of blend those things where it's like, okay, life of a stand-up comedian, just sort of the day-to-day, travels or just the nonsense that you got to deal with being a comedian, and then sort of combine that with that sort of cartoonish, things explode and then they're fine the next minute, or talking animals and things like that, like just all kinds of just crazy shit. I thought if I could combine sort of like Louis with, say, Family Guy, I could really have a show. And then I thought, well, I could also turn myself into, I've always wanted to turn myself into a cartoon where it's like, instead of watching my next stand-up special, you watch my cartoon character do my next stand-up special. And I thought, that'd be cool, because then you could just follow this cartoon character who is me into his world. And plus the cartoon character is a lot more attractive than I am. So it's like,
Stop it. You're a 10.
It's just, it's always, they're Teflon. They're very, cartoon characters can say things and do things and push the envelope with comedy a lot more than real live action characters can. So
I say this all the time. The stuff that Family Guy, South Park, The Simpsons, Rick and Morty get away with, you could never get away with live action. But you draw it, and all of a sudden, anything goes. So I think that's
exactly. I mean, and it really is, because those characters are they're harmless. They're they live in a different world, and you don't take it that seriously, but you can still convey the comedy that you wanted to get across without anybody's feelings getting too hurt.
It's almost like that's the only way satire works. It has to be drawn. Other than that,
really does. It's so much. Yeah, those characters are so much softer and so much less threatening, and that's what I love about it. I love watching animation, so that's what I've always wanted to do. So I started writing a comic book series version of it a few years ago, and I did that because it was just an easier way to get it produced. So so basically, it's like I'm still writing comics, hoping to one day that'll lead into an animated series. So
nice. I can see it. It would fit nicely in between The Simpsons, which is still on somehow, and Bob's Burgers, right? Like
that shall be on until I mean, as long as those voice actors are still alive, they're gonna keep going. So yeah.
I know. All right, man. Well, listen, thank you for being on. You were incredible as always.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me again, man.